My name is Firas Hosn, and I am a senior software engineer and the game programming department head over at CG Spectrum. I have been in the industry for over 15 years now, ranging from behavior programmer, gameplay programmer, and currently AI programmer. My background goes back to my childhood, and it was a summer night. I can't remember what year. I was playing Ninja Gaiden for the Nintendo, and it was like 3 in the morning. I just finished it. An incredible achievement. I left the house. I was living in an apartment building at the time, and I went to my neighbor's and I knocked on the door to wake him up because him and I both played Ninja Gaiden. His parents were like, "What are you doing? It's 3 in the morning. Go back. Like he's sleeping. He doesn't want to talk to you." And my parents were like, "Well, why would you do that?" Anyhow, so this excitement and joy from finishing a video game, uh, you know, translated to me that I want to be in this industry. Like I want to make video games for a living. From that moment on, I knew that I wanted to be in the games industry, and I didn't have the artistic talents. I couldn't really draw music. I couldn't really do sound production or anything of that nature, but I was good in math and science. So when I finished high school and I took a computer science school in high school in the last year, I knew that in university, the pathway to game programming or game development was going to be through programming. And so I took computer science in university. There wasn't dedicated game dev courses. There was just computer science. It was, I guess, relatively new. The industry, it wasn't that new, but like the studies for it hadn't yet solidified to have game programming or game development tracks. I knew that games were coded, and in high school, when I took a computer science class, I gamified everything. So everything I did, I gamified. So we were meant to make a calculator, but to me that was boring. So what I did was I made up, down, left, right buttons, and I made a Galactica kind of clone. So the teacher was like, "Whatever, I guess this shows that you know how to program, so I'll pass you, but it's definitely not a calculator." I'm like, "Yeah, well, something like it." So I like interact, like I like movement, like so basically you can move this character around, you can shoot. So I was like, if I get into programming, then I'm going to be able to continue this. And I like the challenge. Like I really, really enjoyed writing code and seeing it reflected in the screen and the interaction, like pressing a button and seeing something move was mind blowing to me. I'm like, this is cool. This is what drives me about video games that I like anyway. Yeah. So the first game that I ever did actually was after uni. And before I got into the industry, I made like a space robots network game. And so basically, you had these robots in space that were fighting one another, and it wasn't that great. Like I just used assets that I can find, but it was pretty fun. Like it had everything, and it had AI effects, like particle effects of like blowing up a robot. It had networking, so you could play two players on different machines. So yeah, it was pretty complete in that regard. When I finished my studies, I worked on this project, and then I went to a GDC actually, and I shipped that around. And at the same time, I was contacted by Silicon Knights, and from there, I did a couple of interviews, and that was my foot in the door. Great studio to work for, as they were pretty small at the time. I think like 100 or so. So you still had that personalized development and interaction with all the other employees. And yeah, that was it. That was my foot in the door. That lasted a couple of years. Unfortunately, the company shut its doors. And from there, I had got a contact at Ubisoft at a GDC actually. And they liked my work, my CV. I showed them the robot demo that I did. At the time, they weren't hiring. So I went to Silicon Knights, but we still kept in communication. And then they called me one day and they were like, "Can you speak French?" And I remember my friend was with me at the time and thinking, "Over here." And I like paused and I looked up and my friend looked at me and they're like, "No, you can't speak French well enough to actually work at a French speaking studio. You can speak it like to order a sandwich, but that's not the same." So I was like, "Okay, you know what? Yeah, you're right. No, I can't speak French well enough to be in a French game development environment, unfortunately." They're like, "Okay, we'll keep you in mind for other opportunities." And then they reached out a few months later and they said, "Okay, we have an English project," which was Far Cry. It was headed by an English lead and creative team. and they're like, would this be of interest to you? So I said yes. Again, did the interview process, did well, and that was it. And then so they offered me a contract, and I moved from Toronto to Montreal, and that was my big break. The second big break that I had joining Ubisoft on a really big title, Far Cry. The thing about AAA game dev is you work with so many talented people and you have so much at your disposal. So one of the first things that I did was a homing missile, like a guided rocket, and that was super fun because again, the assets, the explosions, everything was really good. So it was really rewarding to put in the math to make it track a vehicle and then see it blow up. And then working on vehicle and character behavior. So the driving and shooting was new, and I got to work on that alongside another programmer, Charlie. So it was good to have collaboration and again challenges in something new, which was vehicle physics, which I hadn't really ever done before. So it was a good environment. I learned from it. There was another physics programmer that also helped out with a few things, and that was probably for me the highlight of Far Cry 3. So yeah, Ubisoft, I was there for literally like 9 years and 360 days or something. I was, I think, a week away from my 10-year anniversary before I left, which sucks. But essentially, I had gotten a job offer across the pond, and for me, having grown up in Toronto and lived a little bit in Montreal, but just having known North America my whole life, I was pretty excited about seeing a different part of the world. So, and it was from a team that had left Grand Theft Auto, which again, I played the GTA 3 all the way through Vice City and 4 and 5. For me, it was exciting to take on this new venture, which was a smaller studio, kind of like my start in the industry. And yeah, I just decided to go for it. So after UB, I went to Build a Rocket Boy. Uh, and it was a good 2-year experience. Again, working in a smaller studio, there was more responsibility and more work because there was a smaller amount of people to do what needs to be done in it, and the scope of it was pretty big. But it was a lot of fun because I got to build a vehicle network in a city, work with design like really good designers on pretty cool car chase sequences and other kind of story mission things, which were a bit new to me. So I really enjoyed that experience, and that brought me to where I am now, which is based out of London. So for me personally, I wake up, do some stretches, get an espresso, check my mail, and check the most important folder, which is the JIRAs. So JIRAs are bugs, tasks that are assigned. I build, get latest of the engine, build it, and I go and tackle my tasks based on priority. So if I had something that I didn't finish, I'll start with that. If something new came up, walkthrough break like a P0, I'll start investigating that. That pretty much takes me through. I'll either communicate with certain people that I need to for information on the bug, QA, and then yeah, that's where my day will go. And of course, it involves lunch and some banter, but that's pretty much it. That's the day. Anybody who really wants to get in the field has gotten in the field. You can't rely on strictly following tutorials, lessons. You really have to go out and have an idea that you want to bring to life. That's where the majority of learning happens. If you do a first person tutorial, for example, you got to think, what can I do to give this a different twist? Maybe I'm going to have, instead of dual wielding, like some sort of wacky triple wielding where you put a gun on a helmet, because that's something that's challenging. Like no tutorial is going to tell you this is how you do it. And then you have a remote control that like shoots it. Like these are going to teach you so much because they're out of the scope of what is normally taught. And it's a great talking point when you actually interview, or if you have in your CV, like I did this thing that, stands out. They'll want to ask you about it. Like, how did you make a helmet based weapon? Like, how did you control it with a remote control, and like even add battery into it? Like, okay, if the battery's drained, it's done. Like these things, you gotta know that there is at the moment a lot of people that want to join the industry. So you really need to back on some creative aspect for the gameplay side, but if that's not your thing and you're super technical, then you can look at engine specs and things that require a lot more technicality, like rendering, number of characters on screen. So like there, you can actually get to know the hardware as well as the lower level compiling and threading. So really, you just have to actually be motivated and dedicated to take your passion and studies to the next level by challenging yourself and not relying on specific content that you're watching. Like that's a good base to teach you something, but the ones that really do get in have side projects or ideas that they actually commit themselves to and execute. I love that it's essentially not restricted. I love the freedom. I'm a big fan of freedom in all aspects of life, and programming is one of those things where if I see something that I don't like or that I want to change, I can actually get in the code and write some code to, for example, if there's just a single uh, weapon that is on a character and I want to introduce dual wielding, I can do that by programming, another inventory slot, another animation sequence, etc. So it's a collaborative effort, but the fact that the programmers are essentially the glue that binds it all is for me what really yeah brings me joy about programming and yeah drives me as a programmer. Every sector I find is trying to tap into gaming, be it previously when you would get like a driver's license, let's say you would read a book and then go and do your test. But I've seen now that they're actually gamifying things where you can actually play a game that teaches you the main points of driving and other aspects, like even in businesses and other big companies like Apple, Facebook, whatever, they're all getting into it. Like Meta has obviously Quest. So I think the fact that the younger generation is pretty much all uh, introduced to gaming at a young age means that the future of a lot of education and just media in general is in gaming, and it's already surpassed obviously film and music. So I think it's going to continue to grow, and it's a way to like again for yourself to express yourself. So even if you're not a part of a AAA studio, I think there's a big enough market where you can break in with your own sort of game that gets picked up by a publisher or is just your own. And there's a lot of Steam and Epic have stores, and there's a lot of places that you can actually go and put your work out there. So I think it's the future media, really.